everyone, and welcome to the dp.DesignProfessionals YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking about what to study for the Project Planning and Design, or PPD, exam of the ARE 5.0. And before we get started, here's a little bit about me. I have taken and passed all of the ARE exams, and I have taken and passed the CSE, or California Supplemental Exam. I am a licensed architect in California, and I have helped a lot of friends and colleagues along the way, and after getting licensed, passed their exams. So this is just me spreading the knowledge and hoping I can help out other people get licensed. As you can see here, I did not pass PPD on my first try. I passed it on my second try, and I'll go a little bit into this later on about what my mistakes were and kind of why this test is such a beast and such a hard test to get through. So the first place that we always want to start when starting to study for an exam is start with the NCARB Handbook, and you can find this online. The link is below. You always want to make sure you have the most recent version because NCARB does update this handbook quite frequently. I would say every couple of months, and they typically update the references and study matrix. So make sure you have the most recent version. You can check the date on the bottom corner on one of the first pages down here or up at the top in later pages. So again, our focus today is PPD, or Project Planning and Design exam. And in particular, we are focused on the references portion because we want to know what to study and how to get through this exam. So typically when I give advice about the exams, I start on this references page. For this exam, just because it is such a beast of an exam and there's so much information to get through, we're starting here, but this is not everything. So I've highlighted every single reference book that they put here. These are a few of the references I recommend, and then I have the ADA and code stuff over here, which I have dashed. This just means that I recommend that you know it, but don't read through all of these documents. It'll take way too much time. It'll be a waste of your time. There's better resources to understand this information. And a lot of it you might already know from just practicing architecture and being in the professional world and having project experience. So the next part we're going to go to is towards the end of the ARE 5.0 handbook. It's the section called the reference matrix. And these couple of pages of the handbook are essentially a matrix of the different resources and references that NCARB recommends for each of the exams. And so as you can see here, all of the sections with green boxes in them is what NCARB is recommending for the PPD exam. This goes on for several pages, but we're going to focus on these first two pages for right now. An important thing to note is at the top of the ARE 5.0 reference matrix page, on the first page, there is a little paragraph that says that these are a list of materials and publications frequently used in the development of items for each ARE division. And what this is basically saying is that NCARB is using these references and these publications to develop test questions. So alarm bells should be going off in your head right now. This is very important to look at these publications and references because test questions are pulled from these books. So NCARB is recommending all of these resources with the green boxes. I have not highlighted all of them. I have highlighted a few that I used and found helpful. You don't really need any of these other books and references. I was able to pass the exam without cracking those open or reading them at all. The ones I've highlighted are the ones I used and was able to pass with. So I'm not going to go into complete in-depth review of each of these references. this is just an idea of where to get started. One thing to note is for this book right here, Building Codes Illustrated, this is the reference book I recommend in order to get a good understanding of code and ADA requirements. It's a great book with a lot of visuals and diagrams to help you understand code and ADA without actually having to read an entire code book. You'll honestly fall asleep reading that stuff. It's quite boring. If you do read the code book, I would say just understand how it's laid out and the different sections of how to find information, where to look for information, because ultimately you are going to be given portions of the code in the exam, particularly in the project scenario portion. So you'll need to know where to look and how to find that information in the code book. So general information you can find out from Building Codes Illustrated, but the actual format of the code book, I would say crack open a code book, pull it up online just so you understand how it's organized. These other books that I'm recommending, I'll go a little bit in depth later about how I recommend studying through these, but I would note that Fundamentals of Building Construction is one of my favorite resources. I actually read through this book front to back for PDD. So if you have PPD and PDD exam left, definitely get this book. This was my primary resource for taking and passing the PDD exam. Moving through the reference pages, there's a couple other books that I'm recommending: Heating, Cooling, and Lighting, Mechanical and Electrical Equipment for Buildings, Plumbing, Electricity, and Acoustics. You really want to take a look at these materials, paying particular attention to the different diagrams and images they have in these textbooks, because it is very likely that you will see these diagrams on the exam or similar information in the exam, because again, NCARB does use these reference books to create exam content, aka the exam questions. These are great books. They have great diagrams. You don't need to read every single page, but pick and choose which chapters you read to kind of either refresh on information or understand information better. The last two reference books I'm recommending from the Matrix are Site Planning and Design Handbook and Sun, Wind, and Light. Again, pay special attention to the diagrams in these books and you should be good to go. All right, so this next portion is the general layout and organization I used in order to study for this exam. The first time I took this exam, my primary study resources were Black Spectacles and Ballast and Brightwood study guides. And I read through some of the reference materials that I recommended, but not all of them. So one of the mistakes I did is, for example, I would take the Heating, Cooling, and Lighting book, and I would read through that kind of front to back, skimming a lot of chapters that I felt weren't that important, and then moving on to another book. The problem with that was that I was reading about heating and cooling and lighting throughout the span of a week or more, and then I would move on to another topic like electricity and acoustics, and then a few weeks later when I was in a different book, such as Building Construction Illustrated or Fundamentals of Building Construction, I would read about those same topics again, and I would kind of lose track of how they were all related. On my second round of studying, I followed the Hyperfine study plan, more or less. Basically what I did is I followed their strategy of studying a particular topic in each week. That way I could focus my studies and really understand the content of that one section. So for 1 week, I would study mechanical systems. They recommend a variety of resources here. I did not find all of them that helpful. Like I said before, I studied a lot of Black Spectacles first round, and what I found about Black Spectacles is that they did not go into enough depth in a lot of the topics. So they would cover all of the topics that you need to know in the exam, but they wouldn't go enough in depth, and you wouldn't have the complete knowledge that you need in order to pass the exam. It also took a lot of time to get through those videos. They were really slow, even watching them at 1.5 or 2 times speed. It just took up a lot of time, and it really wasn't worth it in the end because, again, they weren't going into enough depth. I was just getting kind of surface level information. So in round 2, I focused more on the reference materials that NCARB recommends and went more in depth. Focusing week 1 on mechanical systems, for example, I would read through mechanical systems using the various resources. So going through books like Heating, Cooling, and Lighting, mechanical book, I have abbreviated MEB, but really just going through the different reference books and pulling out any chapters that talked about mechanical systems. That way, all of my mechanical system knowledge was centralized in 1 week. And then at the end of the week, I would make a list of notes just about mechanical systems before moving on. And that really helped me organize my brain and my thoughts around everything that I was trying to understand and learn. I use this as a general guide. I would say this is a great strategy to study by topic instead of by book or reference material. It'll really help organize your brain, your studies, and keep everything more relatable. So again, here Hyperfine is recommending particular reference books and other sources. I agree with some of them not so much, but you can use the list of references I gave and kind of compare it to this and make your own study plan. So another thing to study is FEMA chapters. This is not recommended by NCARB, but across the board, it's highly recommended. There's a thing called FEMA 454, Designed for Earthquakes. The chapters you want to focus on are chapter 4, 5, 8, and 9. I put a link below so you can easily find this document, and it does a really great job of talking, obviously, about earthquake design, but also about things like re-entrant corners and providing some great diagrams explaining those concepts. Great resource, definitely read through it. You'll definitely need this in order to pass the exam. And it's free, so another great thing. Third-party resources. So like I said before, the third-party resources I used in the first round of studying, I primarily used Ballast and Brightwood. Ballast has since come out with a newer version, version 2. What I found about version 1 was it really wasn't that helpful. The information was very disorganized and it didn't really cover completely the scope of information covered in the exam. So I don't recommend version 1. Version 2, the second edition, might be better, so if someone would like to check it out and read through it, it might be better than before. I'm hoping that it is. But really, the part that I'm recommending from Ballast is their practice exams. For me, the practice exams were always a great benchmark to kind of see how well I knew the information or if I was really prepared to take the exam. And it was really just, again, a great way to get into that test-taking mindset and see if I could apply the information into a test format. Because a lot of times you read a bunch of information and you think you understand it, but it's not until you're presented with questions and answers where you have to narrow down what is the best answer and which one is more right than another that you can really tell if you understand the information. So not recommending so much the review manual for this particular test, but definitely recommending the practice exam and practice questions for the PPD exam. So to recap, always start with the NCARB ARE Handbook. After that, I'm recommending a bunch of reference books from the NCARB matrix. On top of that, I would say the Hyperfine study plan is a great place to start in order to get a general idea or a strategy in order to organize your studies. It's a great starting point. Use that in combination with all of these reference books I'm recommending. After that, FEMA Designed for Earthquakes is a must read. Those couple of chapters I recommend are pretty short and it's free. Again, it's linked below for you to easily find. And then after that, third-party resources, in particular Ballast, or what's now called PPI. I recommend their practice exams, not so much the study guide, as I don't have that much experience with the newer version, but definitely the practice exam and practice questions. A few other things I would like to add on is a Quizlet, which is a free flashcard app. They have, if you go in there, you can type in ARE 5.0 project planning and design, and a bunch of study sets will pop up that other people have made. The great thing about this is it's flashcards digitally that you can get on your phone or on the computer and flip through them in your free time, and you don't have to spend time writing hundreds and hundreds of flashcards. You can see here some of these sets are over 200 cards deep, so that's really going to take a lot of time off your hands if you just go in there, select one of those sets, and add it to your queue. Other than that, I would say Designer Hacks is another great place to go through some questions and practice your knowledge. They have a free and paid version, and the feature I liked most about their resource is that they have great practice exams and practice questions. Similar to Ballast, they go through explanations at the end of the exam, explaining why things are correct and why things aren't. So I'm recommending this just because it's another great resource to get yourself in that test-taking mindset, and it's one of the cheaper options out there. Other than that, KARIN Bell's notes. These are notes that I found in the ARE 5.0 community that are really beautiful. Over here, someone named KARIN Bell made a several-page document of condensed notes of all the topic areas. There's great diagrams, amazing drawings that really help condense all the information into short one-pagers in some instance, kind of like this. And this is also kind of following that advice I was giving of study everything by topic instead of by reference book. So here, if you go through all of the different books studying conveying systems, vertical transportation, you can condense all of those study notes from all the different reference books into something like this. I've placed a link down below of where you can get the full copy of her notes. I highly recommend it. They're very nice to look at and fun to study from, which is another great thing. Whenever I had pretty notes, I was always more excited to study from them because there was just something fun and great to look at, and I took pride in those notes, and for some reason it was easier to learn from them. So definitely check out KARIN Bell's notes. Link again is down below. Another resource I would like to recommend is this colorful sheet that is in 11 by 17. Similar to KARIN's notes, it condenses everything into kind of an overview. The great thing about this is it covers basically all of the information that you need to know for the PPD exam, but it's on a single 11 by 17 sheet of paper. So I use this kind of towards the end of my studying just to make sure that I read through all of the general topic areas in the different reference books, and it's a great map of the general scope of the exam content. So it breaks things down. There's a section for mechanical systems, vertical transportation, lighting, acoustics, things like that nature, and it really condenses it all into just like a one-pager, and it's a great thing to review last minute right before you get into the exam. I've placed the link down below. I believe this sheet is only $10, which honestly is a steal considering the great amount of information that's on here and how well organized it is. It's a great visual to have in your back pocket if you just need to review something really quickly. I think what you'll notice is a lot of these diagrams that you're seeing on this 11 by 17 are taken from other reference books. They're just reformatted into a consistent style. So definitely check this out. If not, make sure you pay close attention to all of the diagrams in the reference books I recommended. So again, what you'll notice is because NCARB is using these reference books to make the questions for the test, you will probably see something from those reference books on the exam. So here I've created a mock study schedule. This was more or less what I did. It definitely can be condensed depending on your knowledge already of specific areas. For example, if you are already pretty familiar with ADA and code, you can combine and condense this week into the week before, because really their vertical transportation section you can get through pretty quickly. And assemblies, if you already have some professional experience, you may already know a lot about this section. So This can be condensed, but again, this test is an absolute beast of an exam, and there's a lot of information to get through. So take your time getting through the material to make sure you really understand the entire scope of each section, but also remember that you don't need to memorize every single little detail. You just need to get a good idea of each of the sections. For example, for mechanical systems, you need to understand how each of the mechanical systems works, their pros and cons. So if they give you a scenario, you will be able to pick or select the best mechanical system for that particular scenario. That's kind of true for all of the sections. So it's not extremely detailed, but you do need to have a good idea of all of these topics. This is a general suggestion of what I did. The first time I made the mistake of trying to study for this exam in just a month, and that obviously was not enough time because, as you saw from my score report, I failed on my first try. I also didn't have a very clear study path of what I was studying and how I was studying. My lessons learned here is don't study for just a month, study longer, depending on your level of professional experience. Again, at that time, my professional experience was probably about a year, no, probably like 2 years. So really not that much, but I was still able to pass the exam. I studied for about 2 months following roughly this study schedule. So studying mechanical week 1, going through all the mechanical chapters and all those reference books that I recommended. Week 2, going through all the electrical chapters. Week 3, going through the plumbing chapters, and so on. This was my study schedule while having a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. I was commuting back and forth to my job. I was going to the gym, going to social events, so not completely sacrificing my life. I would usually take Friday evenings off and go to happy hour or birthdays or whatever was going on. And Saturday and Sundays, I really hunkered down for a good chunk of the weekend. But again, not really missing out on too many social events because after getting to this point in my exam taking, I realized that I really needed that balance so I didn't go crazy. I have a lot of FOMO, so keeping that balance in my life was really key. Again, 40-hour-a-week job plus studying. I would typically study Quizlet flashcards on my commute to and from work. Sometimes I would study 2 or 3 times a week with a coworker. We were always taking the same exam, so it was great to have like a study buddy in the office that we could quiz each other and ask questions from. And then after work, depending on when I got home, if I had to work late, went to the gym or whatever, I would study around 2 hours, sometimes less, sometimes more after work. And then on the weekends, buckling down a lot and studying 5+ hours on the weekend, depending on how close I was to my exam. Typically, towards the end of my studies in this week, I would wake up, get my breakfast burrito, and my coffee, hunker down in my balcony and kind of study all weekend long, taking some nice breaks in between, but really focusing in there before exam day. And then in my last week, I would always review everything or brush up on any material that I didn't quite understand or needed to learn more based on kind of how I did on that practice exam. And then for me, I would typically take my exam on a Monday just because my office paid for that time to take the exam and they would pay for the exam if I passed. So I was like, why not get paid for sitting in this cold, awful room taking this exam? So that was my strategy. It was also nice to have 2 full days before exam day to really focus on the exam and not have to worry about work or other commitments. So that was really helpful to me. All right, that brings us to my favorite section, which is the dog of the day. And this week's dog of the day is Moon. It's quite obvious that Moon is not a dog, but I don't discriminate. We have our first cat. Moon's mom is actually an architect. Her mortal enemy is the vacuum cleaner. I've listed here some of her fun facts. Her special talent is sitting where she shouldn't and standing like a human. If you would like your dog or pet featured in a dog of the day, you can email me at dp.DesignProf@gmail.com. I would love to feature your dog or pet in a future video. And with that, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. My goal is to release a new video every week. This week I'm a little bit behind just because this exam is an absolute beast, but we'll get through it. And don't forget to comment down below. If there's any questions you have for me, I would be happy to answer them. Or if you would like to comment down below of any future video you would like to see, I'll add it to my list and be sure to get that out as soon as possible.